Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your presence. We will now start the first panel of this conference. It is a pleasure for me to host this panel, where we will discuss the passenger perspective in public transport. Before I invite my panel colleagues to start their presentations, I would just like to give you a few words that bridge this discussion with the METPEX project. So, if we want to develop a more inclusive transport system, accessible to all citizens, we need to understand their needs. We need to engage in a more passenger-oriented approach to better support the decision-making process of new transport policies. When we look at the quality indicators of public transport operations, we realize that most of them are related to their performance. For sure, it's important, their performance, but we see indicators like speed, occupancy rate, number of services, distance traveled, costs, revenues. But is the passenger happy with the service? Does it serve its needs? METPEX was all about the passenger perspective in public transport. What are the real needs? How do we measure their experience? What really matters to them? We found out that when motivated, the passenger is willing and wishes to participate, to share his opinion, to have a voice in the decision process. In METPEX, we have conducted 8 trials in 8 different cities of socioeconomic realities, very different, and of diverse transport complexity. We have received more than 6,000 answers, which has allowed us to develop a comprehensive analysis of the passenger profile. And we found out that if we want to access the passenger experience, their needs, we need to realize and recognize that the market is complex and diverse in terms of their characteristics and preferences. We need to understand that the market is made of several groups, and that some of these are vulnerable and hard to reach, and their needs, in terms of accessibility to the transport system, is quite different from the typical user. Each one of these groups is unique somehow, and perceives differently the utility, the impact in their experience of the various attributes of the transport system. We were also able to understand which variables care most for each group, which variables influence more their experience. And the conclusion was that these variables may be quite different from user group to user group. But an approach like this, envisioning the knowledge and comprehension of the passenger needs, has several challenges and barriers of different nature, and some of them may be difficult to overcome or to act on. I'd just like to share with you some questions and challenges that have come to my mind during the project. Are transport operators or authorities aware of the diversity of users and of their needs? Do these stakeholders have a real interest in knowing this information? They need of such information? Are they willing to pay for it? Can they afford it? Is it possible to efficiently take into consideration the needs of all these user groups? Is it possible to plan a transport system that satisfies all its users? If not, how do we choose what is relevant? How can we enhance the participation of the most vulnerable groups? Are these the ones we should care about? The ones that have more difficulty to adapt? Concluding my introduction, if we want to develop a more inclusive and sustainable transport system, we need to know our market. We need to take into consideration the different needs of the different user groups. We need to give a voice to all of them, including the most vulnerable, because each one is unique in terms of needs and their perception of accessibility. This is a challenge that comes with no small effort from all stakeholders, but the society thanks. Thank you. I will now like to invite the first speaker of this session, Mr. Christopher Irwin. Mr. Christopher Irwin is member of the executive board of the European Passengers Federation. He's closely engaged with European transport policy and research in the transport sector. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's extraordinarily pleasant and encouraging to come to a meeting where there is a presumption amongst most of those present that public transport is a valuable thing and that understanding passengers' needs must be a driving factor in delivering. So that's good, and what I'm going to be saying really is that Europe has set itself an enormous policy challenge in terms of stimulating a set of new practices in relation to transport usage, for reasons I'll touch on, and that the only way that that challenge can be met is by a fundamental shift in the culture, not just of the operators, but in the wider political culture, and certainly giving a priority to the needs of end users. That's basically what I want you to hear from what I'm going to say. Let me tell you very quickly, though, European Passengers Federation brings together national and regional organizations from 34 organizations in about 20 countries. My home organization is an organization called Passenger Focus. At least it's now called Transport Focus, because it's recently assumed responsibility for road users as well as public transport usage. It's funded by government, it's a government creation, it has a reasonable research budget. It would like more money, but €3 million a year on domestic passenger research is a useful start, and I don't think that any other European state has anything comparable, certainly in terms of scale. It works principally through a national passenger survey. This is a survey conducted twice a year, once in the autumn, once in the spring, and involves interviews each time with around 30,000 people. But in addition to that, there are focus group work and the specialist work and so on. The great thing about the National Passenger Survey, as I will try and demonstrate at something entirely different in Brussels tomorrow, which is looking at responses that should be made to the Thalys attack, the great advantage of that research is it now looks quite good and longitudinal. One can look back and see how quickly passenger attitudes adjusted to a trauma, for example, the trauma of the subway and bus bombings in London in July 2005. And in this data, you can burrow down, you can identify things, and it becomes a fantastic tool which, if I'm lucky tomorrow, I hope will correct some of the more visceral, the more immediate reactions to something traumatic, and perhaps ensure a better balance in policy decision. But I mustn't get carried away by that. I think I just wanted, though, to make emphasize a particular point. I was enormously pleased as I read through the METPEX material to see that the apostrophe S, the genitive case, was shown correctly. Those of you who are English grammarians will know it's not just a problem for those learning the language from outside the UK, it's a problem in its application in the UK. There is no such thing as the passenger. There are the passengers. There are many groups. We aren't just members of one group. I'm a member of many groups of different passengers. Therefore, understanding the fine grain, the fine tuning of those different needs is a really important thing, and I saw the METPEX work that I looked at as beginning to get much closer than anything else I've done, that I've seen lately, to achieving that. Let me just go back to Keir's white paper, because I think it was a remarkable document. I think he was extraordinary, he and his colleagues were extraordinarily bold in advancing it, and I summarise what it was trying to do in these bullets, which I think I've probably just pulled from publicity sheets around the white paper. But the key thing there is a reduction in emissions and oil dependency in a relatively short time scale, if you're thinking in terms of changing whole cultures. And the way of doing it is to get a significant modal shift along the way. Great stuff, very ambitious. Can you really achieve something that, in my view, will require something like a 10 or 12-fold increase in, for example, rail's share of transport kilometres that happen today? We're not just talking about a doubling of rail's share. When you factor in growth in travel, when you look in more detail at how the numbers work out, you are looking, as you go up from the present share of under 10% of passenger transport in rail and go up to over 50%, you are looking at a multifold increase, and that is an enormous challenge. And it's a challenge you have to ask, is it achievable, either just in terms of its scale, or is it physically achievable? Is the capacity and the networks there to deliver? So, big challenge, a fantastic challenge, one I, of course, support, but in reality terms, how do you get there? Now, I think there's a further pressure, and I think if the review of the 2011 White Paper is to do its work properly over the next few months, it needs to take in these sort of factors as well. Since I put this slide together, in fact, I think there has been a movement on the wider health impacts of transport. I use the figure that the health impacts of road transport are eight times more lethal than deaths from road accidents. I was interested that Ms. Delhi earlier, the Green MEP, I think citing much the same information as I would use, said 460,000 deaths a year from the wider impacts of road transport, 460,000 deaths from health impacts compared to 26,000, I think, from road deaths. So that's a sort of 18-fold increase. That's enormous. The GDP issue, 1.5% of Europe's GDP is a significant figure, and again, I think I pulled that out of the White Paper to get that number. And then it's been touched on implicitly several times, talking about spatial policy, just the sheer pressure on land use, on urban areas and so on. Buses are a very much more efficient way of moving people than individual cars. And not least, they take up much less space when they're parked, as things tend to be for much of the day when people are at work outside the peaks. Can you get me the next one? So, what does one do about it? There are, I suspect, three ways of approaching it. You can say, let's have a command economy. Let's determine that 50% of travel will be making use of sustainable means by 2035 or 2050 or whatever. But I suspect that the idea of a command economy approach is likely to remain out of favour for another 25, 30 years, at least, from those who remember the previous failures of command economy. Therefore, do you say, well, let's rely on distress purchase, the fact that many people who use public transport have no realistic alternative to it. They do it not out of choice, but because there is no option. And I don't think that's a viable way forward either. That doesn't help build a better society. That doesn't, in the end, create the accessibility, the growth and employment they want. Therefore, it seems to me logically the only way forward is to make public transport the mode of choice. And what a challenge that is. We start them out. I don't know whether you're going to be able to read this. Look at the arrows at the top. What I've done there is take from the EU Consumer Market Scoreboard, which gets upgraded every year. And I have to say, rail has done a little bit better this year, or the 2014, than 2013. I've taken the scoring of different service sectors. On the left-hand side, you'll see things like packaged holidays, personal care, score very well. The yellow arrow points to car rental. A lot of satisfaction with car rental and a lot of satisfaction with the performance of airlines, if you're using airlines as a service. Down the other end of the scale, alongside banks, real estate providers and insurance salesmen, the heroes of our society, you will find rail services. And there, with the purple arrow, are local transport services, which are really urban buses and trams. And I think what this is saying is satisfaction with the sort of transport I think we collectively in here would regard as good is very low at the moment. It's disastrously low to be down there. How do you move that on? Well, my own view is you've got to have a demand-led approach. Just a side observation. I sit on the Horizon 2020 Transport Advisory Group, and one of the things I've been arguing with colleagues during the last couple of years is that past Horizon 2020 spending, or past European research and innovation spending has been over-focused on the supply-led side. You know, what can technology do? How can we come along and invent something, rather than the demand side? And that's why I was very encouraged to hear colleagues from the Commission talk about the importance of social and economic research in the next phase, because that seems to me to begin to shift the focus away from what the big industries really want a bit of subsidy for, to prove some new material is the answer to man's dreams, to trying to address the much more practical issue of how do you achieve end-user satisfaction? Because I believe end-user satisfaction is the key measure. To me, it is I'm lost the word. It is the substitute. It is the analogue for much else, particularly in the transport sector, where you get market failure and markets themselves don't actually provide in the way they might do in a nice economic liberals world of purity. You have to find some measure to do these things, and it seems end-user satisfaction as an important measure in that sense. Now, the Commission has begun, hasn't yet completed the work, but has begun to take the importance of satisfaction on board in looking at its transport priorities. After quite a lot of lobbying we did in the rail market monitoring study working groups, a Eurobarometer was commissioned initially, I suppose, in 2011, and the second one was done in 2013, and if the pressure's kept up, I very much hope future ones will be done too, because you begin to get this valuable longitudinal look. And this is just a snapshot from it. This shows satisfaction with rail. And there you'll see the blue quarter represents high and the purple low. And there's an awful lot of dissatisfaction in that. So again, just coming back to the challenge. Now, you saw in the other, totally independent of this, the other chart I showed from DG Sanko, that public transport, meaning buses and trams, did rather better than rail. And again, it comes out in this Eurobarometer study as well. So just get your eyes around that pie chart. And now here's the next pie chart. So public transport really does rather better. It's not great, you know, still 1/3 are not really very enthused, but things can be done. In the UK, what there is increasingly is an acceptance by government that in managing the public transport provision process, there needs to be a greater acknowledgement of end-user needs, and certainly the National Passenger Survey conducted by Transport Focus, for which the UK government pays, have begun to help the whole process of public sector procurement move forward in the transport area. The National Passenger Surveys, as I said, are conducted twice a year. There are 33 key factors reported, but many more subsets in there. And I extract from that three key messages. When you look at this data, which is based on very large samples and developing over time, you see three things come through. People are concerned by the value for money of the ticket they're purchasing, but when you try and probe what they mean by that, it's about reliability. Are the trains punctual? Do they turn up as promised? They're concerned about the ability to find a seat at the time they wish to travel, which is partly an issue about frequencies, partly an issue about timetable planning, but equally about provision of capacity. And the really important one to me is that one of the main drivers, the biggest by far main driver of dissatisfaction, is the way in which things are managed when things are going wrong, particularly the lack of adequate information. And not just information, apologies and things like that, but usable information. If services are going wrong, you as a passenger are more likely to be interested in information and value information that tells you something which allows you then to make a judgment about alternative arrangements. You're told, sorry, the train is delayed, that is frustrating. Sorry, the train is delayed, but within 20 minutes we'll know whether we're going to be moving ahead or not. That is a much more useful piece of information. Now, safety is clearly a passenger priority, but interestingly, safety is something that is very seldom articulated when you ask people ab initio what they want. But I put safety in as an assumed one. What I'd like you to do, if you're so minded, is to and I suppose it'll be on the website or in the package, you are very welcome to make use of the survey analysis facility that is there, where you can interrogate this data quite intensively. As I say, I've been doing it for my own reasons the last 4 or 5 days to do this work for the Security Summit tomorrow. And the wealth of data and the richness of the different themes is fantastic, and I commend that to you. So, what am I saying? I'm saying that if we are to get the sort of modal shift anticipated by the white papers, there has to be a radical change in the quality of service provision, because that's the only way you're going to get the satisfied passengers, which I regard as satisfaction as a measure of achievement, because that's going to lead to modal shift. But you're going to get that if you get the political support necessary to release the resources that enables you to enhance the quality. If you attract people to a public transport system but don't provide the resources because there's not the political support to do so, you're going to cause more dissatisfaction rather than solve the problem. So in the Horizon 2020 Transport Advisory Group, we had a very interesting presentation from our colleagues thinking about energy matters, and they raised the challenge, how do you launch a moonshot? How do you begin to conceive something as radical as sending people to the moon? I think that's the challenge facing transport planners. If we want to see significant modal shift, how do you actually launch that moonshot? And I think I have to say this, and I'm not saying it just because I'm here, looking at the work that I found online that METPEX has been doing, I felt you were beginning to feel your way towards that sort of process. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Christopher, for your insights. I would now like to invite Ms. Marie Denninghaus. She's a policy officer at the European Disability Forum, the organization that represents the interests of 80 million Europeans with disabilities, and she's responsible for the areas of transport, accessibility, and mobility. Welcome.
Can we change the presentation? Thank you. Yes, good morning, and yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail now of one specific user group that was already discussed earlier. I have to say I'm also very happy to see that this was a big part of the METPEX project as well, and I'm also really looking forward to the final report and the findings of this, because this is of course also useful for us to use in our advocacy work. I will give a very short introduction. As Tiago already said, we are the European umbrella organization of national disability organizations, but also European NGOs. So we represent all types of disabilities. It's a cross-disability organization. So that can be anything from autism to persons in wheelchairs, brain injury, really everything, intellectual disabilities. So our approach is also quite broad. So we are trying really to keep an open mind, and this is also reflected in the main topics that we work on. So one big part is, of course, human rights, social policies, then accessibility. In that case, that covers transport and the built environment, what I am responsible for, and ICTs, some information, communication, and communication technologies. So this is my colleague who deals with that, but that also has an influence on my work, of course. And our motto is nothing about us without us, and this is also what we usually, let's say, try to practice. So normally one of our board members would have been here today. All of our board members have either disabilities themselves or are a family member, but unfortunately we have a meeting today, so they're all in a meeting in Greece, so I'm here as a replacement. So just in a little bit more detail, how do we work on transport? Of course, we have a lot of issues to cover, so transport is only one of them, but accessibility is so important that we really make this as one of the priorities that we work on, because I will also explain this a little bit more detail later, but since accessibility is also a prerequisite for many other rights or for any other aspects in the lives of persons with disabilities, this is of course important. So we represent passengers, but not as EPF does really as usually passengers in general, but we do this as part of other EU policies. So we provide, let's say, the additional information that EPF already gives, but then we focus more on specific needs. And we are also members of different working groups that deal with specific aspects of accessibility. For example, we worked on the technical specifications for interoperabilities in the rail sector. So that is a, let's say, more specific one, but also in other areas, air, rail, road and sea transport, we're all involved. So we cooperate with EU institutions, but also the transport industry. We have regular exchanges and attend conferences, and of course also within Brussels, so to stay informed, but also to keep the awareness up that this is an issue that should be followed. So as I said, we work with experts from our membership, so that usually have also disabilities themselves or are informed on the topic. And what our work is based on mainly is the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and this states clearly in Article 9 and also Article 20 of this convention that access to transport is a right and not a luxury. So what Ms. Deli said earlier, actually there is already a right to transport, access to transport, but of course we would like to spread this message much further. So to link a little bit up with what we are talking today, so why is transport accessibility important? As I said earlier, it links to other parts of life. How can you get to your job if you cannot get onto the train, if you cannot get onto the metro? How can you attend school if you cannot take the school bus? Going shopping, but also just normal things in life like hobbies, going to the cinema, things even as basic as participating in elections, going voting, you need to use transport. In that sense, we like to point out that this transport is a link between these different modes. And as it says in the UN Convention as well, it says access on an equal basis with others. This is quite important because we can say, well, but yes, if now we provide a special taxi service for persons with disabilities so they can get to their work, that's very nice, but it still means that you are separate from your friends. You cannot go on the same bus trip with your friends in school, or you cannot talk to other people, so you're again separated in a little bubble. You're being treated differently. Even if this might be convenient at the moment, this is not really what we want. Another very important aspect that we really try to push for more and more also to realize this is that persons with disabilities are customers, and they are often a group which has been neglected in the past. So one thing that strikes me often is that, especially in surveys, or it actually persons with disabilities, either they are not really taken into account, or actually that the satisfaction with transport in particular is not even that bad. But that is also sometimes because they're a group that actually has not even the possibility to use transport. So that shows also that there is a huge potential that can be tapped, but at the moment is still neglected. And another thing that why it is important is that also accessibility is not just for persons with disabilities, but it has a much wider impact, and it improves the comfort or the passenger experience for all passengers. If you're a mother with a baby and a pram, if you have a lot of luggage, there is a lot of things that are common, and accessibility is not usually perceived as something negative for other passengers. So if you install a lift in a station, people will always be happy if they can take their heavy suitcase and don't have to drag it up the stairs. So this is something also which has to be kept in mind, that yes, it is an investment, but it is not only to the benefit of a small group of people of what it is usually perceived. So the current situation, as you all know, of course, is that infrastructure, vehicles, and also information are not accessible. There are, of course, good practice examples, and it is getting better, but this lack of accessibility is one of the main obstacles at the moment, and is one of the biggest needs, let's say, that has to be improved for persons with disabilities. So infrastructure, that means everything from stations and, as it was mentioned earlier, but also the urban environment, that can be basically the way that from when you leave your house, if you have a curb in front of your house and you're in a wheelchair, it will be very difficult to even just get out of your house, to move freely within the urban environment. Then, of course, the vehicles. So we have always this issue with ramps, with different boarding equipments. There are some solutions which are very good, but they are not widespread. So we, of course, try to inform about this and make this known more widely. And accessibility of information. That means if you're at the station and there is only written information, that will not be accessible to someone who is blind, but maybe also someone who has an intellectual impairment and who does not understand written information. Signage, these type of things. Again, it's also what in the next paragraph, the lack of information, for example, to book, like how do you book a ticket online, for example, if the website is not accessible, so you cannot even use it, you don't even know what services there are. So even if there is assistance offered, how would you know about it if you cannot find it or if you cannot read it online? So this is a second big point. And also, last but not least, the lack of awareness and training that, of course, mainly concerns staff, so bus drivers that are not trained how to deal with a situation. I had an example of a lady who was hard of hearing, so she did not understand or hear what the bus driver told her, and he got very upset and almost aggressive because he thought she was making fun of him. But of course, if you have the right training, you will understand that also older people have these problems quite frequently, so you should be prepared to react in an appropriate manner and to give information also in alternative ways. So this is something that's we see quite a lot, but also the general public, so to explain, for example, in buses, the wheelchair space is for wheelchair users and not for prams or for your luggage. So really just raising awareness that for these people, this is a matter of really not just inconvenience, but whether they can actually just live their life the way that they want to. So now just to give some ideas. So what needs to be achieved? That's the ideal world. This is something that we are trying, of course, to work towards. This is difficult, and we know that this will not happen tomorrow, but this is what we would like to see. So a seamless, multimodal, accessible travel chain from door to door for everyone. We know that most transport will probably not be 100% accessible for 100% of the population all the time, because there are many things that are difficult to achieve that we know also are costly, but already planning ahead really can make a big difference. What we do say is that this accessible travel chain, even if maybe not 100% of the vehicles can be accessible, rolling stock is always a big problem in rail sector, of course, because of a long lifespan, etc., is that we say that there should be at least the what is called under the UN Convention reasonable accommodation. So if we then cannot make it right for 100% of the people, how can we at least help the remaining people that are not covered by this and give extra help? So this is meant by reasonable accommodation. We would like to see an easy to understand and easy to use accessible booking system, and also through ticketing, so that you can cover different transport modes, because this is very confusing for many people. And this is not only for persons with disabilities, but for a lot of passengers. And of course, raising the level of awareness, as I mentioned before. Universal design is something that many of you might have heard before, and we really like to promote this approach because it sees also that this is a beneficial approach for many other people. So it's universal and not just for persons with disability. And of course, as I said before, reasonable accommodation. And also the fact that we prefer not to have separate solutions, but that you can, for example, if you want to use a train and you are in a wheelchair, that you don't have to be in a first class vehicle because that is the only place where you have space, but your friends then don't have the money to pay for a first class ticket, so you have to sit by yourself for the whole journey. So these little things are very annoying if you put yourself in that situation. Of course, this is something we would like to change. And how this can be done, we have some very concrete ideas. We work, of course, on EU level, so I am not speaking for the national level here. This is a lot of more EU concepts. We are promoting, we have been for a long time now fighting for the publication of a so-called Accessibility Act. That means accessibility legislation, which is across different policy fields, which does not exist yet at the moment. We have some provisions under passengers' rights, but this is not covering all areas of all policy areas. And of course, a more systematic way that persons with disabilities are involved. So we're now also happy to see that in METPEX, for example, people were interviewed. You have the focus groups, so I suppose that includes also the views of persons with disabilities, whereas we see often that decisions are taken on a policy level where people have not been consulted. So if you don't ask the users what they want and what they need and what be the best for them, I think this already calls for some problems in the long run. As I mentioned before, the universal design principles, that this should be more widely used. Standards is very important for us, so it doesn't always have to be the top-down approach and from the EU level, but standards I think is very useful for the industry to help them. And of course, as also I said already before, that it has to be part of a wider let's say vision of like our cities, how would we like to travel, and this I think can be improved still a lot with accessibility. That was my presentation. I'm looking forward to some questions and of course also afterwards to see the final report. Please don't hold back. I'll also be here during lunch break. I'm happy to reply to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. In fact, we represent a group of users that have really special needs, and sometimes we misunderstand what is really needed. Now I'd like to invite my third speaker, Mr. Raymond Hencks, who is a member of the European Economic and Social Committee. Mr. Hencks is a member of the permanent study group of the implementation of the white paper on transport. He has drafted numerous opinions focusing on transport issues. Please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Je vais donc un peu analyser les besoins en transport public du point de vue du droit communautaire. Alors, si je devais donner une appréciation plutôt générale, dans quelle mesure les besoins en transport public sont satisfaits dans l'Union européenne, je dirais comme un proverbe français qui veut que si je regarde, je me désole, mais si je compare, je me console. Alors, pour en revenir au transport public, le transport public dans le droit communautaire, c'est un service d'intérêt économique général. Et les services d'intérêt général existent parce que généralement les règles du marché intérieur conduisent à une série de polarisations économiques, de polarisations sociales et territoriales et générationnelles. Les services d'intérêt général existent pour répondre à des besoins des utilisateurs. Et je crois qu'il est utile de rappeler que ce n'est pas gracieusement que les États membres, autorités publiques nationales, régionales et locales mettent à disposition des usagers des transports publics, mais ça relève du traité. Nous avons un article 16 qui dit que la communauté et les États membres, chacun dans les limites de ses compétences respectives, veillent à ce que ces services fonctionnent sur la base de principes et dans des conditions qui leur permettent
see to it
d'accomplir
that the
leur
services
mission.
work on the
Il y a
basis
donc
of
une
the principles
compétence
and under
partagée.
the
D'une
conditions
part,
that
la
enable them
communauté
to fulfill their
doit veiller
missions.
à ce que
So
ces
the
services
community
fonctionnent
must see to it
et
that
les
these
États
services
membres
work,
ont également
and the
cette
member
mission de
states
les mettre en œuvre.
also
La
have this
Commission européenne,
obligation
en
to
tant que
implement
veilleuse
these.
des traités,
The
doit
European Commission, as the guardian
doit
of the
veiller à ce que,
treaties,
effectivement,
must see
les
to it
États membres
that the member states indeed
satisfassent à ces obligations.
meet
Dans cet
the
article 6, on
obligations
dit que
that
ça
are
doit
incumbent
doit
upon them.
fonctionner dans des conditions
In
qui
Article
leur permettent
16,
d'accomplir
it
leur
is
mission.
stated that
Ces
it must
conditions
be under
sont
conditions
reprises au
that enable
protocole
them
26 qui est
to
annexé au traité
fulfill their mission.
et qui énumère les
These
valeurs communes
conditions are in
des services
Protocol
d'intérêt économique
16,
général, dont évidemment
and
les transports.
where there is
Alors,
detailing
un
on
des points de
services of
ces
general
valeurs communes,
economic
c'est que le rôle essentiel et le large
interest.
pouvoir
One
discrétionnaire
of the
des
values
autorités
is that the
nationales,
essential role and the large
régionales et
discretionary
locales
power of
pour
the
fournir, faire
national,
exécuter
regional,
et
and local
organiser les
authorities to
services d'intérêt
provide,
économique
have
général
executed,
d'une
and
manière qui
organize
réponde autant
services
que
of a
possible
general
aux besoins
economic
des
nature in a way
utilisateurs.
that
Il
meets
y a donc là
the
déjà
user
une
needs
obligation
insofar
pour
as
les
possible.
États membres
So there is an
de fournir
obligation on the
des
part of the member
services
states
de
to
transport
provide
public qui
public transport
répondent aux
services
besoins
that
des
meet
utilisateurs.
the
Dans ce
needs of
protocole,
users.
on
In this protocol,
énumère également
there is a
quelques
list
critères
of
relatifs à ces besoins.
criteria
On dit qu'il
pertaining
faut
to
que ces
these
services
needs.
soient d'un haut niveau
It
de
is stated
qualité,
that
de
these
sécurité et
services
quant au
have to be
caractère
of a high level of
abordable,
quality,
égalité
safety
des traitements
and
et promotion de
accessibility,
l'accès universel et des
equality
droits
of
des
treatment and the
utilisateurs,
promotion
sans
of
toutefois
universal
qu'il
access
soit
and
défini
rights of
ces
users
différents
without
critères.
actually defining these
Alors,
criteria.
les besoins réels des usagers des
The
transports,
real
on en a
needs
déjà
of
parlé
users
ce
of
matin,
public
c'est un
transport,
sujet
we talked about
assez
this
vaste
morning. This
et
is
assez
quite a
complexe,
broad
ça
and
dépend des
complex
perceptions
subject. It
individuelles
depends on
et des
individual
catégories, les jeunes, les travailleurs, les
perceptions and
personnes âgées,
categories, young
personnes
people,
handicapées.
workers,
Ça dépend du
the
mode de
elderly,
transport, qu'il soit
the
métropolitain, urbain,
disabled. It depends on
périurbain,
the type of where the transport is taking place,
que
be
ce
it
soit par chemin de
metropolitan,
fer, par route, par
urban,
voie navigable.
international,
Alors, on
by
a
rail,
jusqu'ici
by
toujours
road,
regretté
or
qu'on n'a pas de
inland
mécanisme ou de
waterways.
méthode uniforme
So
pour que les
we do not
usagers
have
puissent
mechanisms or
exprimer
uniform
ou
methods
définir leurs besoins.
for the
Les études et
users
le
to
projet
express and
METPEX
define
viennent donc
their
à point
needs. So
pour un peu
studies and a project like
veiller
METPEX
à ce qu'on
are very
dispose
timely
de ces données.
to see to it
Mais
that
nous,
we
dans
have
notre comité
these,
économique
data.
et social
In
européen, on
our
est allé un peu plus loin.
Economic and Social
On a,
Committee
depuis des
here in
années,
Europe,
on demande une
we've gone a little
évaluation
bit further.
des
We've been
services,
asking
des
for an
services
appraisal
d'intérêt économique général,
of
c'est-à-dire
the services
également
of general
des services de transport.
economic
Et nous
interest
voyons une
for years
évaluation
now
qui
that
va
includes
au-delà
transport services.
d'une simple
This is an
enquête
appraisal that
d'opinion
goes beyond
Eurobaromètre ou d'une simple
Eurobarometer poll or a
enquête sur
survey
la satisfaction des usagers.
the user
Un système
satisfaction.
d'évaluation
It is
prend
an
également en
assessment
considération les approches
that
des opérateurs,
takes
les
into
approches
account
des
operator
travailleurs qui sont dans le
approaches,
secteur, les approches
the
une
workers that
approche
are in the
économique,
sector,
efficience
the
et d'autres
economic
critères donc, qui
approach,
va un peu plus
efficiency,
loin.
etc.
Il faut dire
So criteria that
qu'il
go
existe
a little bit
une
further.
méthodologie
There is a methodology
qui a été publiée dans une communication
was
de
published
2002 par
in
la
a
Commission
2002
sur une
communication
méthode pour
by the European
évaluer
Commission
ces
on a
différents
method to
services.
assess these
Or,
different services.
cette méthode a été
This
fortement
method
contestée. On a
was
reproché
challenged.
à la Commission
However,
d'être
the
juge
Commission
et partie
was,
parce que c'était une
reproached
évaluation qui est
that it
faite
was
par
biased
la Commission
because
et
this is
qui
an assessment
finalement
that is
le résultat
conducted
est également
by
déterminé
the
par la
Commission
Commission.
and that the
Alors,
result is
la Commission
set
a
by the
lancé
Commission
une
as well.
enquête publique,
So
c'était
then
en
the Commission
2003,
launched a public
puis elle a
inquiry in
publié les résultats de
2003.
cette enquête
It
publique
published
sur une
the
évaluation
results
en
of
2004 et
said
en
inquiry in
2007,
2004,
je crois,
and in 2007,
elle avait chargé un consultant externe
commissioned
de faire des
an
propositions.
external
C'était
consultant to make proposals.
un externe qui s'appelait Van Dyck, qui
Van
en
Dyck.
2007
a
And in
proposé
2007, this consultant, Van
des
Dyck,
propositions
made
qui,
proposals
par après, ont disparu dans
that
le tiroir des oubliettes.
subsequently were
Alors,
shelved, unfortunately.
Ah, ça cloche. Bear with me. Pour définir les besoins réels des usagers, je dirais que les usagers doivent bénéficier d'un service AAA. Un AAA, tout d'abord, accessibilité, disponibilité, une offre du service, densité des points d'accès, conditions d'accès, abordable, c'est-à-dire une politique tarifaire, c'est-à-dire des tarifs que tout un chacun peut payer, et agréable, c'est-à-dire la qualité du service, le confort. Toutes ces trois, accessibilité, abordabilité, agréable, tout cela revient à ce que j'ai cité auparavant, c'est le protocole 26, ce sont les critères, ce sont les valeurs communes. Alors pour l'accessibilité, j'ai vu dans le programme qu'on va en discuter cet après-midi. Je ne vais donc pas m'attarder sur ce sujet, seulement il faudra se demander s'il ne faut pas en faire un service universel avec un ensemble minimal de droits et d'obligations définis au niveau communautaire à l'image de ce qui est fait pour les postes, ce qui est fait pour les télécommunications et ce qui est fait pour l'électricité. Nous, notre comité, on a déjà fait des propositions qui vont dans ce sens. Alors, le deuxième point, c'était un haut niveau quant au caractère abordable. L'objectif est de permettre l'accès, quels que soient les revenus des usagers, c'est-à-dire les populations à bas revenus, consommateurs vulnérables ou désavantagés, doivent également pouvoir se payer ces transports publics. Alors, le caractère abordable, c'est toujours une notion qui est très très vague. Elle est estimée en utilisant un index qui donne le pourcentage du revenu annuel qu'un usager doit payer pour bénéficier pendant un an de la fourniture forfaitaire d'un certain service. Ça encore, c'est très 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 vague. Bon, en principe, c'est le marché qui détermine le prix. Mais le livre vert de 2003, il reconnaît que le marché ne peut pas, dans les meilleurs des cas, te proposer un prix fixé en fonction des coûts, ce qui pourrait ne pas garantir l'accès de tous à un prix abordable. Alors, on en déduit qu'une réglementation des prix peut être conforme au traité, c'est-à-dire qu'elle peut déroger aux règles de concurrence et d'État et également au marché public.
So a regulation on price must
Quant
be in accordance with the treaties.
Au haut niveau à caractère abordable, la législation européenne n'établit pas les critères à utiliser pour déterminer si les prix sont abordables, mais elle souligne que les États membres doivent définir certains critères à appliquer pour déterminer le caractère abordable d'un service et devront veiller à ce qu'il soit réellement offert en mettant sur pied un mécanisme de contrôle des prix et ou en accordant des subventions aux personnes concernées. Cela ne se fait pas, ou du moins cela ne se fait pas dans beaucoup d'États membres. La conséquence en est que la Commission devrait veiller à ce que ce qui a été repris dans cette communication de 2003 soit effectivement mis en œuvre. Alors, le haut niveau de qualité. Dans le protocole, on parle d'un haut niveau de qualité. C'est évidemment un sujet très très complexe. Et de nouveau, cette notion haut niveau, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Il faut donner un sens à tout ça. Alors, j'ai trouvé dans une communication de 91, la qualité de service peut être définie comme offrant aux consommateurs ce qu'ils souhaitent. Alors là, tous les rêves sont permis. Si on me demande ce que je souhaite en tant que transport, je dirais que le bus doit s'arrêter pas juste devant ma maison, mais 5 maisons un peu plus loin, que l'horaire soit de ma convenance, qu'il y ait un siège chauffé et réservé, évidemment, et que si du moment que je suis assis, la voie la plus directe à ma destination et en plus, si possible, gratuitement. Ça, c'est tout ce que le consommateur souhaite. Mais vous avez vu que dans le protocole, la Commission est devenue beaucoup plus prudente. Elle met autant que possible. Il faut répondre aux besoins autant que possible. Donc, ce n'est plus tout à fait ce que le consommateur souhaite. Il n'existe pas de définition générale d'un haut niveau de la qualité. La qualité, normalement, elle se définit à partir des attentes et des degrés de satisfaction des passagers. Mais la Commission vient de lancer un projet pilote sur ce qu'elle appelle un budget des ménages. Un budget des ménages, là, elle veut mettre un panier de services fondamentaux dont tous les citoyens ont besoin, mettre un prix et puis en dégager ce qui est abordable, ce qui n'est pas abordable. Alors, les critères pour un haut niveau de qualité sont évidemment temps d'attente, ponctualité, continuité de service, confort, etc. Bon. Les communications sur les services d'intérêt général retiennent la nécessité de garantir ou de respecter les choix démocratiques en ce qui concerne, entre autres, le niveau de qualité des services. Selon le règlement 1971 sur les droits et obligations des voyageurs ferroviaires, les opérateurs sont tenus de publier annuellement un rapport sur la qualité des services fournis, en particulier sur la ponctualité des services de transport des voyageurs. Ça existe dans les chemins de fer, mais ça n'existe pas pour tous les services de transport, sauf que dans les contrats entre les autorités publiques et les opérateurs, on peut mettre des critères de qualité en tant qu'obligation de service public. Alors, la Cour de justice, elle a statué que s'agissant du niveau élevé d'un service public, il ne devait pas nécessairement s'agir du niveau le plus élevé techniquement possible. Encore faut-il faire des arbitrages entre la qualité et les coûts, c'est-à-dire entre l'efficience. Un haut niveau d'abordabilité et de qualité, c'est le service gratuit. Évidemment, le plus abordable possible, c'est si ça ne coûte rien. Il y a 23 réseaux en France, il y a des villes en Europe, à Tallinn, Hassel, Leipzig et Riga, qui offrent la gratuité des transporteurs. Là, le problème de l'abordabilité financière ne se pose pas. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'il faut? Il faut, à mon avis, donner un sens à tous ces critères, abordabilité, accessibilité, promotion d'un accès universel, qui sont dans le protocole 26. Il faut en donner un sens. Il faut répondre aux besoins des usagers, mais pour ça, évidemment, il faut les connaître, il faut donner les moyens aux usagers d'exprimer leurs besoins. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup pour votre vision sur ce sujet, sur le problème qui se pose dans le futur. To finish this panel discussion, I would like to invite my last speaker, Mr. Xavier Tackoen, who is Managing Director of Espaces-Mobilités, an independent consulting firm that advises public authorities, transport operators and companies in the field of public space and mobility.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the invitation and for this very interesting conference. I'd like you to excuse me for being rude because I'll pronounce a very bad word, which is called marketing. Because actually, marketing is something that is pretty recent in the public transport sector. Like if it was something new, like I believe that there are some items that we buy every day, like food and drinks and things like that. But I think transport is something that we buy every day, and not every day the same, because we need to go to different places. And the thing is that most people, most users, not public transport users, I mean citizens, most people have never been surveyed by their public transport operators. Never, except in the UK, because they have a good sample. And that's a big problem. It is like if your nearby shop would never ask you about their products and things like that. And I'd like to make a comparison with another sector. It's a transport sector, of course, but the automaker industry. Their model has completely evolved over time in terms of marketing. They started in the 30s, maybe 50s, to talk about freedom. To have a car, you would be very free. Then they developed the concept of power, maybe pleasure, and then comfort, because we had some congestion, so the seats needed to be very comfortable to be seated a bit longer in the car. Then finally, the sustainable concept came out, and they had to talk about the green, because every car needed to be green. And now we go a bit further now to the smart concept, the connected car, the autonomous car, etc. It has evolved over time, but for the same people, actually, And they have developed forever a user-oriented approach. Faster piece, another car really meant for a lady or a young person. Then the connected car with a link to the cloud. The family car, which can offer more space to have children and things like that. Let's think just a few seconds. Do you know many transport operators that have developed such a segmented approach of their users? There are some good examples, new marketing approaches of the transport operators, but not many. And another example, budgetary example, I made some calculations in Belgium. The car industry is spending almost 300 million a year in communication. The main rail transport operator, 8 million, and the STIB here, the local public transport operator, a bit less than 1 million. It gives you the difference. Why? That's the question. Maybe a question of competition versus monopoly. Historical transport operators have been operating in a sort of monopoly, so they did not need to compete with others. That's completely different in the auto industry, where they have to compete within the sector. But things are changing very rapidly because the digital age has come and new competitors are coming, collaborative or shared economy. And they're somewhere in between, and there's something that they know very well, marketing. And that's why, and it's directly linked to the passengers, the user perspective, that it must change the way we consider things, and we make our sector evolve. Because there is one moment of truth, and don't be afraid, I'll be very quick because I guess everyone is very hungry. The moment of truth for people that are not using regularly or never use the public transport, you may not have two opportunities to convince them. Sorry. The first impression never dies. That's the big problem for the moment. The first impression is relatively poor. Mr. Irwin mentioned it before. So I'll let you fix this. Yes. So I can And that's why I think the METPEX exercise is very, very much very important, actually, because we need to know how to attract, first to attract passengers, but then how to keep them. And there are like those Dave McClure's metrics. How do users find you, or how do they come to the public transport? What's their first experience? First time is always very important. Are they going to come back? How do you make money? Because we know that this is lots of pressure on the public transport sector. We need to have more customers, but it shouldn't cost more to have more customers. We need to find the right equilibrium. Otherwise, we'll never survive. And what are your users telling about the public transport, about you? Are there good ambassadors? That's the big question. Just as a conclusion, this is one metric of the passenger experience. They want to travel. They need to orientate, access, pay, rest, care, store, eat and drink, shop, connect. They need everything in one place, the interchange, the vehicle, etc. But it's actually what the METPEX has been evaluating, so we can have different perspective. Because from mass transit, we need to have unique passengers, and many people mentioned it already. And probably to change the way people can operate for the moment, and it's been mentioned as well, most of the investment, most of the money that's spent for public transport concerns investments and operations. Maybe 1% is about marketing. We must move from this supply side approach to a demand side approach. It's been said. To give an example, you've probably all heard about this startup, French startup, BlaBlaCar. They mostly hire people that have been using this system. It would mean in the public transport sector that in the future you will only hire people that are regular user of your system, because then you're sure that they know that accessibility is poor, that connectivity is really poor as well. And maybe that's also a thing that in the management the mind must change. Thank you for your attention and have a good day.
Thank you, Xavier. Elena, I think we are a little bit late in the session. I'm sure you have some questions to make to our speakers. I believe that all of them might be able to ask questions during the lunch, so perhaps we'll be ending this session and any questions could be made during our lunch or even during the next sessions. Do you agree? Okay. Everyone has one question to... Yes, please.
Yeah, actually, it was a very interesting presentation. I am Andrius Jerzemskis from Vilnius, from Lithuania. And actually, what we found in METPEX that users or clients or passengers, however we call them, they have quite different needs. Needs depends on the social situation, on travel patterns. And would you make your suggestions based maybe on your experience? How is better to manage those different needs in one public transport mean, in bus or in even tram? For car users, it is easy. They're producing many cars for young people or long Mercedeses for business clients. But we have only one tram or only one bus, and the needs are different, and we get it from the METPEX service and analytical work. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrius. Does anyone want to answer? How can we reconcile all the needs of the passengers in one mode of transport?
Well, I mean, maybe I can try to just give like my view on that, because I think, of course, I don't know exactly what the outcome of your research was, and of course, there are different needs. But I think, for example, as I saw in the matrix that Xavier just showed, is yes, a disabled passenger has the need for access, but he also wants to eat, and he also wants to shop. And I think if you maybe see it more as there are different layers, I think, of needs. So you have like the basic need for a disabled person, that would be access. But then, of course, you also want this train to be on time. So maybe if you can see it more as layers of priorities, because in the end, certain groups also have common needs that maybe overlap, but not all of them have the same priority. That would be my view on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the way I think about it is more in terms not just of needs, but of needs states, to use the jargon of marketeers. You know, when I buy a car, I'm not really buying it just because I want to go from my home to my station, for example. I buy it because I want to make a statement about other values. My choice of car, to some extent, reflects how I want society to perceive me and how I perceive myself. And you get a very complex range of factors coming into that. And I think the same is in many ways true with public transport. Let me give you what I think is a relatively simple example. I spent about 20 years of my life more on planes than on the land. I mean, I was traveling all the time around the world. And one of the things, this was the time when deregulation was beginning to happen, so in the 90s. And one of the fascinating things then was you very quickly discovered which airlines, first of all, were responsive to your personal need states, that met your aspirations, as well as getting you from A to B at a price you could afford. But you also saw how they started to think about the whole journey experience. Now, I was traveling as a business person and therefore traveling in the expensive end of the plane. But it was fascinating how in the 90s things happened, like if you were traveling business class and traveling intercontinentally, the airlines operating that service worked out that the hassle you wanted to avoid was the hassle of getting to a station, to get to an airport, to have your luggage handled, to be delayed, and so on. And they came up very cleverly, I thought, for the business class passenger, with notions like providing the chauffeur car to take you to the airport. When you get to the airport, having your baggage handled specially. When you're in the airport, going to a lounge for business class people where you're given a range of other choices. They were thinking of a whole journey. And suddenly what became, for most people, a hassle, or for many people, a traumatic experience, suddenly became a whole journey experience because the air carriers were bright enough to see that they could appeal to your needs in many ways as part of the whole package. Now, when I travelled by bus, I was director of a bus company in England for a number of years. And when I arrived, I've travelled round on the buses just to try and get a feel of what they were like. And I noticed that most of the buses had very similar advertisements on the inside. And you see it the same on the steep buses here in Brussels. If you are pregnant, they gave you a number to go to. If you have domestic violence problems, there's a number you can ring up. If you are homeless, there's a number you can contact. The advertisements in there were really were directed towards the issue of deprivation. And the message you were getting as a passenger was, if you're a bus user, you are a failure. Indeed, Mrs. Thatcher once defined anyone on a bus must be a failure. And I think that was a very unfortunate statement. But in some ways, when you use British bus public transport, that message comes back to you. You're not capturing the need states of passengers. And I think one needs to encourage the people running transport operations and those people, slightly different, those people providing the public service contracts or the subsidies or the government funding to think rather more ambitiously about the service they are providing. If I can just take the opportunity to pick up one point in Xavier's slides, I thought what was interesting in his competition monopoly slide was, to me, it was an opportunity to recognise that one of the problems in public transport provision in most of Europe is that the client is not the customer, is not the passenger. The client is the public authority, the government, who is providing the funding. So when I talk to people in the UK Department for Transport, who are nice, intelligent, sensitive people like all of us here, nevertheless, their prime concern is how can we provide a service as cheaply to the taxpayer as we possibly can, and not how we provide a service that will really value and make the passenger feel valued and provide a qualitative change in what's offered in order to get a modal shift.
Thank you, Christopher. Mr. Raymond, do you have something to say?
Non, pas grand-chose, mais
Not a
il y
whole
a
lot,
également,
but
dans le protocole, il y a également
in that
un
protocol I
critère
was
qui
talking about,
est
there's a
égalité de
criterion
traitement. faut une égalité de traitement. Alors je ne peux pas m'imaginer que maintenant dans les bus on fasse une classe business et une classe économique.
Business
Ça,
class
je
and
crois
an
que
economy class. I can't
ce n'est
imagine that
pas
happening
très
on buses.
conforme
I do not believe
aux règles du traité, bien que dans les
it
chemins
is
de
in
fer, ça existe.
conformity
Dans les
with
chemins de fer, on
the
a
rules
une
of the
première
treaty.
classe,
But in
une
the
deuxième
rail
classe.
sector, we do have
Mais
that. There is a
bon,
first
si c'est
class and a second
subventionné
class.
par
If it is
l'État,
subsidized
c'est
by
déjà
the state,
assez douteux si
it is
si
quite
quand même il reste
dubious.
abordable pour tout le monde. Alors ça
It has
passe,
to remain affordable
mais
for
c'est quand
everybody.
même à la
That might be
limite de
acceptable,
l'égalité de traitement.
but that is quite
Thank you.
dangerous when it comes
So,
to equal treatment.
thank you for your yes, please. Yes. Can you turn on your microphone?
Once again, okay. My name is Luis Broda. I am coming from Valencia. I am the public backup operator in the city. And I have a question for all of you. First of all, congratulations for the conference. It's quite interesting. But I want you to give me maybe an answer to new public transport systems like BlaBla cars. We are talking about new experience, new ways to travel, but what do you think about safety, payment of taxes, how we are going to deal and how we are going to measure that experience? European Commission wants just to promote this kind of car sharings, but what do you think about the main terms that maybe is safety, experience, how we are going to measure it? I don't know, it's a question just for all of you.
I think it is a really good question. The answer, in part, to me, is effective, independent regulation. You need to have regulators who are not a tool of government, where their incentive will be to keep costs down, but regulators who are working to a legal basis that requires them to be independent in their judgment to fulfill certain objectives set by parliaments or by governments or whatever, but need to be independent in how they do that. And I think, so when you think about BlaBla cars or when you think about innovative types of taxi service, I think you have to assume that that cannot work in a public policy sense unless it is based on a system of regulation that has the respect and commands support from wider society. That way you get the safety, that way you get the minimum standards, but equally you don't find that you oppress innovation in a way that is counterproductive.
Mr. Raymond, do you have something? Can you add something?
Non, d'après ce que moi je sais, c'est que la Commission est en train d'élaborer un cadre juridique pour encadrer toutes ces prestations de services qui, à l'heure actuelle, sont un peu dans le flou juridique.
Because there's a legal vacuum at present.
Okay, thank you. So we now end this session. I would like to invite you now for the lunch. Elena, can you give some details about the lunch?
The lunch is served outside, and let's hope that it won't be beyond 1:30, the latest 13:40, please.
Thank you.